welcome all of our board members, advisors, staff, visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. And I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Due to COVID-19, the board's work in this monthly meeting spans over 2 days in order to provide time for the needed discussions from each respective committee. Today we'll conclude our work with our 2 remaining committees, Student Learning and Achievement and Business Operations. I remind our visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to SBE meetings at stateboard.ncpublicschools.gov. Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. During the course of the meeting, you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter.
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Ford. I'd like to recuse myself from discussion on BizOp item number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. The record reflect that Mr. Ford has recused himself from BizOp 2. Thank you. May 5th, 2020 marked the annual observance of our Teacher and Staff Appreciation Day. We're grateful to all of our North Carolina teachers and staff for your daily commitment to enhance the lives of our students. And this year, COVID-19 amplifies our appreciation, and we join the superintendent and the department with the North Carolina Lighthouse Leaders Initiative for the month of May. Teachers and staff in our state are true lighthouses, leading and lighting the way to provide innovative solutions, social, emotional, nutrition, and learning supports for our students. I'm reminded of a statement that I'll paraphrase. Teachers and school staffs affect eternity, as you never can tell where your influence stops. However, know that it lasts a lifetime. Your daily efforts provide the foundation for every other profession. Never underestimate your influence. In the lives of our students, you're planting trees under whose shade you may never sit. What you do for our students each day matters for a lifetime, and we're eternally grateful. We now come to our special recognitions, a time on our agenda when we recognize those educators, schools, local school systems, or advisors for outstanding achievement and honors. And today we recognize 2 DPI and 2 district team members, each of which exemplify what it means to be a North Carolina Lighthouse leader. Today we'll begin with Dr. David Stegall. At the 2020 North Carolina Technology and Education Society Conference, Dr. Stegall was awarded the International Society for Technology and Education Making It Happen Award. Making It Happen is an internationally recognized award program for educators and leaders in the field of educational technology integration in K-12 schools. NCTIES gives this award to a person who has made significant contributions to advance the integration of technology and media into curriculum and to improve teaching and learning. We can think of no more deserving educator who's devoted his life to children than Dr. Stegall. Dr. Stegall, we'd like to honor you today and give you an opportunity to make a few remarks. Congratulations.
Wow, Mr. Chairman, I thank you very much for the kind words. I've dedicated, you're right, it's a dedication because it's who I am and it's in my DNA, and I'm surrounded by people every day who remind me how blessed I am to be able to be an educator in North Carolina. I couldn't think of a better job and a field of, I've said many times, this is our mission field, and being able to know that you're making a difference because someone, and lots of someone's invested in me. I I've shared with many times. I grew up in poverty and in pretty tough situation, and education was a great equalizer. And I can't think of any more deserving group to recognize this week than teachers. As I've said, it's the backbone of our culture and our country, the success. Healthcare and education to me are right for everyone. And I do appreciate the recognition, and I certainly don't feel deserving, but I do hope this brings to the work that happens every day in our state. So thank you, sir, for the kind words.
Yes, sir. We want to extend not only to you, but to your wife, Mandy, and to your children, because we know this is a team sport, how much we appreciate your commitment to our students and how well you represent all of our teachers and school administrators and every professional and staff member in North Carolina. We so appreciate you. Next, we have another awesome member of the team to recognize, and that's Miss Sneha Shah Coltrane. She was recently awarded the Gallagher Advocacy Award from the North Carolina Association for the Gifted and Talented. This is a truly outstanding honor and absolutely well-deserved. The James G. Gallagher Advocacy Award is presented to an individual inside or outside the field of gifted education who's been a consistent advocate on behalf of gifted students and a voice for supporting gifted education in North Carolina. Formerly called the Special Award, this award was renamed in honor of Dr. James J. Gallagher in recognition of his continued role in advocating for gifted children, their teachers, and their parents. North Carolina and the greater world is in a better place because of his dedication to excellence. Nominations are made by the general membership, and final selection is through secret ballot by the North Carolina AGT Board of Directors. And of note, this award is not presented each year, so it's a unique recognition and one that Ms. Shah Coltrane absolutely deserves, and we're delighted to recognize her today. Ms. Shah Coltrane, would you like to make a few remarks?
I was wondering why the family were hanging out here near me this morning. Similar to what Dr. Segal said, first of all, thank you for recognizing us. It sure seems like a lifetime ago since this award was before COVID. But not only this award, but what COVID-19 has really shown us is how when we all work together and focus on the fundamental right of education for every single one of our North Carolina public school students, it's incredible what can happen. I remain incredibly humbled by the work of the field of gifted in our state, which remains a leader in the country, but also remain completely in awe of the focus, the passion, and the deep commitment of this board, of our other policymakers, of leadership, and of our frontline educators, our teachers, our principals, our superintendents, our charter school leaders, all who have an incredible intent of doing what is needed and what is deserved for our children's sake. And so I remain absolutely grateful to everyone here, those listening, and all of our educators across the state. And COVID-19 has only reminded us of how when we all work together, we can meet the fundamental right that our students deserve for quality high education. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Ms. Shah Coltrane. We're delighted that you're surrounded by your family, and particularly your children. There are children all over North Carolina who have received a better start in life because of your efforts and the way you've supported them and their teachers. So congratulations on this award. Our final recognitions this morning go to North Carolina district leaders highlighted in Education Week. In February 2020, Education Week chose 12 district leaders to be recognized as leaders to learn from in their annual recognition of outstanding educational leaders. 2 North Carolina educators were among the 12 recognized for their leadership and their dedication to students and families, making their communities and their schools better places to live, taking less visible elements of district leadership and harnessing them towards broader academic and social goals. Dr. Nellie Aspel is a director of sectional children with Cleveland County Schools. Her passion and career path began at a very early age. As a second grader, she worked with students with disabilities. Thanks to an intuitive teacher who recognized her very bright student needed additional engagement. As EC director in her county, embracing students being difficult to teach extends beyond the population of students who have a disability. Many students struggle with social emotional needs without an identified disability. Dr. Aspel has broadened her focus in recent years, looking at ways to provide support for students with mental health issues. And as she goes a step further each day to ensure school staff have the tools needed to meet students' needs and knowledge of professional resources to support students and families. Under her leadership, the district has developed a program to support students with mental health issues from mild to severe. And through training, grant-supported projects, and artful braiding of grant money, outpatient therapy, and support from the district's multi-tiered system of support, Cleveland County Schools are making an impact on improved school mental health services under her leadership. With all of these initiatives, the overarching goal is for student mental health issues to be addressed early and efficiently instead of school staff just bouncing from crisis to crisis, as she explained. Furthermore, she describes that sometimes we just have to stop and teach social and emotional learning skills before we can provide those academic skills. Dr. Aspel said it best when she said it's not that what we're doing is so magical. The way that everyone works together to make it happen. Dr. Aspel, we congratulate you on this recognition and we'd be delighted to hear from you at this time.
Okay, there. Thank you so much, Chairman Davis and members of the board, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk a couple of minutes about something I'm very passionate about. It's been a great honor to be recognized as one of Education Week's 2020 leaders to learn from for the work that we're doing in Cleveland County Schools. The leadership of DPI's EC division has clearly communicated their goal for supporting schools and using a tiered approach to implementing behavioral and mental health supports as part of each school's curriculum. And DPI has provided guidance and supports for those efforts through MTSS, PRC 29 behavior grants, school safety grants, the North Carolina Mental Health Initiative, and SAMHSA Aware demonstration sites. In Cleveland County, we've been working for almost 10 years to develop, implement, and expand a framework of support for providing social, emotional learning and mental health services. Why is this work so important? Well, 1 in 5 youth have a mental health condition, and the American Psychiatric Association says that half of all mental health conditions develop by age 14. And undiagnosed and untreated mental health illnesses can significantly interfere with a student's ability to be successful in life and school. And at worst, a student with negative coping behaviors can possibly exhibit violence against themselves and others when mental health and behavioral issues are ignored. But we can change all that. Students spend much of their time in schools, and schools provide a unique opportunity to not only increase awareness, but also to identify and treat mental health conditions. In our school system, in Cleveland County Schools, through the implementation of comprehensive approach, we've reduced the gap between the time a student begins to exhibit difficulties and the time they receive interventions by training staff in the community resilience model known as CRIM and youth mental health first aid. We've helped equip staff with skills to identify early warning signs and respond appropriately to students who experience trauma. Our ability to help students has been greatly enhanced by creating threat assessment protocols and conducting intensive training for school and district response teams. Student mentoring programs and increased awareness has helped break down the stigma of mental illness, and young people with mental health challenges have developed a greater sense of self-worth. And of course, interagency collaboration is so important in getting services to students in a timely manner, and the MTSS framework that DPI has been such a leader with has helped us infuse a social emotional learning into our core curriculum. Although I'm the one being recognized at Education Week in Cleveland County, our success has been based on that shared belief by our superintendent, central office staff, school-based administrators, teachers, support staff, community parents, really just everybody, that supporting students through the prevention and treatment of mental health issues is as much a part of our responsibility as teaching, reading, and math. Mr. Rogers, who I love, once said, anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. So in North Carolina, we have a unique opportunity to impact positively graduation rates, dropout rates, academic achievement, social adjustment, post-secondary success by implementation of mental health supports for our students. Now more than ever, we've got to be ready with sufficient numbers of trained professionals who have the resources to really help our students both stay well, both physically and mentally. So I really appreciate the honor of appearing for you today and the opportunity to show some of my passion for this area of services for students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Aspel. And as you were making those remarks, I'm sure I was joined by so many who could picture in their mind the child that you were describing that so needs this support and this caring and this love that you've expressed through your work. And we're grateful to you and your colleagues all over this state who serve our children who need it the most. Our final honoree is Dr. Johnny Waller, an Assistant Superintendent of Auxiliary Services and the Student Services Director with Lee County Schools. She oversees the district's counselors, nurses, and social workers and is in charge of nutrition, transportation, and discipline as the Assistant Superintendent of Auxiliary Services. You know, I wonder when Dr. Waller sleeps with those types of responsibilities. But it's as Lincoln County Schools Homeless Education Liaison that Dr. Waller has made a special commitment to providing for the district's transient population, a group of students that face a host of special challenges. Educating teachers and other staff on signs to watch out for is critical to identify students who may be in dire situations that may also be overlooked. This includes education for staff and community around homelessness. Dr. Waller believes it's critical that the central office, school principals, teachers, and support staff understand when a student is facing extra difficulties in their personal life and maintain constant communication. What stands out about Dr. Waller, her colleagues say, is her deep sense of empathy, something she said comes from her late father and was honed by her time as a social worker. She saw her father always looking out for his neighbors in small ways and always there to help.
Give me just a second, I'm on the phone.
The initiative that Dr. Waller sees as having the most impact for the homeless students in Lee County is Project Liftoff, a summer enrichment program for middle school students who are experiencing homelessness. The North Carolina School Boards Association gave Project Liftoff an award in 2018, recognizing it as an exemplary education program for boosting student achievement. That same year, the state's Department of Education recognized Waller as the North Carolina Homeless Liaison of the Year. My job is to increase awareness that poverty and homelessness is traumatic, and it's going to impact them academically, said Dr. Waller. And if we take care of their social emotional needs, their academic piece will come. While Dr. Waller cannot be with us today because no doubt she's taking care of our students, we want to honor her and congratulate her on this award. Thank you, Dr. Waller. Next, I'll turn to our superintendent for his report. Superintendent Johnson.
Thank thank you. I will keep mine brief as well because I also just want to thank all the educators around the state and, of course, all the parents as well. Parents and educators and all school staff have shown amazing resilience during these unprecedented times. Again, as I alluded to yesterday, there was a time before COVID-19. There will be a time again after COVID-19. The work that has been done across the state by our educators, by our parents, and the work that has been done at NCDPI has been truly phenomenal and amazing. And I do just want to highlight the amazing staff at NCDPI and the can-do attitude. I'm on a lot of phone calls with a lot of leaders across the country, and a lot are hitting that stage where they're overwhelmed. This clearly can be overwhelming, but the staff at NCDPI has consistently had the can-do, will-do attitude, acknowledging that there are huge challenges in front of us still, but not complaining, just going forward and getting the job done. So thank you for all the staff at DPI. Special shout out to the COVID-19 communications team that came together. They did a great job celebrating Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you. And onward and forward next, are going to be some pretty incredible high school graduations that we're working on. So I'm sure we'll have updates on that next month. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. We'll now provide a COVID-19 update to the board, which will include an overview of recent legislation as well as our priorities in our planning to welcome our students back into our schools in the fall. And I'd like to begin that update first by thanking our governor, not only for his strong leadership, but also for his confidence in this team, the state board and DPI, by giving us this challenging mission, which we fully embrace. I'd also like to thank the governor's office, particularly Jeff Coltrane, for his partnership and leadership during the past 40 to 50 days, as well as I'd like to express our appreciation to the General Assembly and all members, but especially to Senator Ballard, Representative Horn, Representative Clemens, and Representative Fraley, who have been terrific thought partners and leaders in helping us develop a plan and shepherding it through General Assembly. I'd also like to thank the department and the high level of collaboration achieved with DPI, particularly under the leadership of Dr. Stegall and Dr. Emery. And I'd like to express our gratitude for the partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services, especially with Secretary Cohen and with Susan Gale Perry. We could not have done this without you. Realizing that we are in only the second inning of a 9-inning game and that there's much work that remains to be done, these partnerships built over the past 45 days or so will become even more important in the days ahead, including our upcoming work on the school calendar. At this time, I'd like to turn to Vice Chair Duncan, who has provided exceptional leadership, particularly around some of the top priorities that the board has had in feeding our children and caring for our exceptional children. Mr. Duncan?
And give a lesson or social emotional support through the front door of a house, or reach out constantly by telephone for social emotional support, we would all be very wealthy indeed. Our educators have been truly awesome in the work that they've done and the commitment that they've given to our students. And if we were not reminded of how significant they are to the social and emotional welfare of our children before, we certainly have been very strongly reminded with an exclamation point of how critical that need is as we develop the lives of our young people. I want to particularly commend the nutrition workers and our many of our bus drivers who have participated in this effort, and our custodians who've kept our facilities clean and disinfected so that that work can go on. I can imagine nothing more important than making sure that our children are fed in this state. And there have been tremendous hardships visited upon so many of our neighbors and friends and family members and our community members throughout the course of this. And unfortunately, that's probably not finished yet. And we hope for a quick comeback. But in the meantime, we have a lot of families who are really in a difficult circumstance. And providing the kind of aid that our nutrition workers and our custodians and our bus drivers have provided is just very inspiring. They have been genuinely heroic in their unceasing efforts to make sure children are fed. I also want to call out our leadership at DPI, Lynn Harvey and Janet Johnson, who have been splendid in their research and support for the legislation that has provided the funding that will allow this child nutrition work to proceed. And obviously, thank you to our legislators for that. We just cannot be grateful enough for all the work that's been done. And the last group I'd like to make sure we lift up and is the local heads of our child nutrition work in each of our counties. Some of the stories that can be related about the work these people have done to make sure there was food available are just way above the call of duty. All of this done with a far greater sense of contact during a shelter-in-place period than would otherwise be the case. And these people have undertaken these risks, and they've done it willingly and happily because they care about our kids, and they have provided so much support for our students, not just nutritionally, but socially and emotionally. And we give thanks to you. We also want to lift up, if I could, the work of our Exceptional Children Department. Sherry Thomas and her exceptional work, trying to keep going as much as is possible under all the circumstances, the work for our exceptional children to try to keep them moving forward as is so critical. We all know the saying, to those who have the least, we owe the most. And certainly that defines who children are, and in particular, exceptional children. We are so grateful to have them. I'm always reminded by a speech I heard, a graduation speech I heard that was totally unplanned. It was at graduation at Gateway several years ago, and there was only one graduate that year who was 22. He had a very short life expectancy, but had lived to be 22. And he was very ill at the time of the graduation. In fact, passed away a couple of months later. But it was a wonderful ceremony. At the end of it, his father said, "Would you mind if I said something?" He then recaptured how critical Gateway was, that school was, that special needs school, and the support from the teachers, how critical that was to the life of his child. And rather than covering all the specifics he gave to that, let me move to the end of what he said. He said, "I've often heard that Harvard is the greatest school in the land. But for people who say that, they haven't spent a day here at the other special needs schools we have. Because if they will spend a day here, they will know that this is the Harvard of all schools, and Harvard is not even a close second," which speaks volumes about the dedication of our workers in the exceptional children area and for the wonderful work that they're doing. And that has proceeded as much as it can through these circumstances, and a lot of preparation is already going into working forward for future services to provide these children what they need and to work through all the issues that can arise during the course of the pandemic for them. So we are grateful and lift up their exceptional services to exceptional children and give thanks to all of them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan, and appreciate your leadership on these critical issues and recognition of those leaders who have moved this work forward. Now I'd like to call on Mr. McKinney to present a legislative update. And as he comes forward, I would just remind those listening that, Mr. McKinney moved into this position just a few weeks before COVID-19 pandemic started. And without exception, he's exceeded all expectations. Mr. McKinney, we are really grateful for how you've leaned in, leveraged, built new relationships, and the contributions that you're making for our students and teachers in your work as our legislative liaison and community affairs director. Mr. McKinney?
Thank you. It is a great honor to be working with this team. I'm gonna begin before I get. Good morning, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, Lieutenant Governor Forrest, board members and advisors, and all who represent the North Carolina Shire, particularly our honored educators and my state board and DPI colleagues. I wanted to begin today by revisiting Chair Davis's comments following Governor Cooper's announcement to temporarily close our school building doors and to continue the impactful and meaningful work in delivering an equitable opportunity to each and every student in North Carolina. As we strive to meet these needs with a COVID-19 response in a dynamically fluctuating environment, we are working to ensure fair and just support to our North Carolina public schools. And these words resonate deeply. In the words of Chair Eric Davis, only time will tell how our communities recover from this public health crisis. This will inform our decisions about how public education will be required to evolve to ensure we maintain our basic constitutional responsibility. Regardless, we know public schools are forever changed, and continued partnerships, communication, and collaboration will help us take the necessary steps this summer to prepare for the new school year. North Carolina is home to 7 majestic lighthouses, symbols of strength, hope for the weary, and beacons of safety in rough waters. And like the mighty lighthouse, we will continue to stand our ground with an unwavering commitment to endure the challenges thrust upon us by COVID-19. We will rely on our resilience to maintain excellence in education while we continue to provide hope and needed support to the children, families, and North Carolina's public schools. And I wanted to highlight the 2 pictures to the right of this slide. For many of our educators across this state, the Ocracoke Lighthouse and the NCAT Ocracoke Leadership Program continues to provide that beacon that we all use to guide not only ourselves, but also our students, our families, and our communities through these rough waters. And as we walk through this presentation, I want us to think about the words that Board Member James Ford left us with at the last meeting, and really thinking about what our preparations for moving forward and a mindset of beyond normalcy. I want to begin today with Governor Cooper's executive orders. My colleague Ann Murtha and I have built this PowerPoint with a lot of information that I will not go over specifically, but we wanted this to be a warehouse of information that you would need, particularly as seen here, what each of the executive orders are with both English and Spanish translations, to kind of walk through the history of this event and its impact, but also the response and the strength and collaboration between the organizations and programs that have been mentioned previously in this meeting. Not on this, because this was revealed last night, I also wanted to lift up Board Member Wendell Hall and Dr. Townsend Smith, who were both named to Governor Cooper's DRIVE Task Force to improve equity and inclusion in education. I know we could not be more proud of their representation in this very, very important mission in our state moving forward. The next slide provides information and a link to the 3 phases that have been often referenced, particularly right now as we hopefully work through phase 1 to phase 2, which has been given a temporary estimation for May 22nd. And I think these are very important to consider as we're having conversations and making decisions, not only about our own personal actions, but actions that involve our public schools and activities, including award ceremonies and graduation expectations. The next slide updates us on the federal COVID-19 relief, particularly the CARES Act. I know there is a lot of kind of confusion about particularly where each of the pots of money is coming from and then also going to. So this is a link to the recommendations from the Office of State Board Management. And also wanted to highlight particularly the state and Governor Cooper's emergency fund, which was the PRC 154, as well as the 232 million in various state PRICs that are included in the Senate Bill 704, House Bill 1043, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund, as well as the Federal CARES Act, which includes the K-12 Emergency Relief Fund, which is PRC 163 with 396 million, and then the Governor Emergency Ed Relief Fund at 96 million for emergency support of K-12 and IHEs. So those are several of the connections with the federal COVID-19 Relief CARES Act. The General Assembly reconvened Tuesday, April 20th, 2020, in a very historic event. The next myriad of slides here are not only updating any legislation affecting K-12 public education, particularly House Bill 1043, which you will see linked there, which was signed this past Monday by Governor Cooper, as well as Senate Bill 704, which you'll see down at the bottom, signed by Governor Cooper as well on Monday. And then just the bill summary. And again, I'm not going to walk through this individually, but you can see the importance of the funding ramifications here, particularly as Vice Chairman Duncan mentioned with child nutrition, with EC, with student support services, with remote teaching and learning initiatives, as well as with cybersecurity and non-digital remote teaching and instruction resources. Wanted to highlight the Summer Jumpstart Program, which has also been funded to the tune of $70 million. So we are working in collaboration with DPI there to begin that process and look at guidance and expectations for that program in complement with supplemental learning summer programs. These next few slides just highlight whether it's testing waivers, low performing school waivers, read to achieve waivers, advanced math placement modifications. It walks through each one of the specific modifications that were made to public education. As we progress through the slides, we also see school calendar, school improvement plans, and then also specific changes related to teacher evaluation, standardized testing, and modifications to EPP requirements. So Ann and I really just wanted to make you all aware of all of these changes, and we'd be honored to specifically field any questions related to these and any outreach that you all require moving forward. The next page, COVID-19 response from North Carolina Public Schools, provides two very valuable links that this state has been using over the last few months to keep everyone informed. As Superintendent Johnson referenced the communications working group, this has been a group that has worked every single morning to build out a cohesive and collective piece of work that everyone can look at, which is directly linked here, as well as a weekly top 10, the most current one linked there that is issued to superintendents and DPI leadership. Wanted to also, as been previously mentioned, lift up the COVID-19 working groups, which continually are working to provide not only guidance and lifting up policies that the State Board of Education considers, but also in providing guidance to the field on a myriad of topics included here on the right. Again, lifting up Dr. Stegall and Dr. Bev Emery for their continued leadership in all of these groups as they work now to solidify on reentry plans. Wanted to briefly update the board on the House Select Committee, particularly on education. You can see a complete list of the working groups here. Education is the one that pertains to this particular meeting, and as Vice Chairman Duncan and Chair Davis have alluded to, it has been an unbelievable work of collaboration with this group in building out policy and building out needs and in listening to multitude of voices and stakeholders from the field. These are a series of links that you can see from all the way from the last meeting on April 23rd, dating back to March 26th, the agenda, specific documents that could be used in becoming a little bit more familiar with any of the discussions that took place and leading up to those funding requests and how they ultimately were represented in House Bill 1043 and Senate Bill 704. Wanted to also reiterate Chair Davis's comments to the legislative group with DHHS and how the board is looking at just a long-term strategic plan in a response state for our students and our teachers, continuing to work with child nutrition programs, continuing to work with remote teaching and learning, and then for teachers, really providing guidance and building out a successful transition into 2021, also providing additional remote learning and teaching opportunities for professional development, and then continuing with the reentry plan to listen to stakeholder voices as we look at recommendations for social distancing to begin 2021. That's the response stage. The next is a readiness stage. So as we transition from this school year into the summer and into our third stage, which is reentry, some more of the of aspects of this stage. So the summer jumpstart learning program planning, more social emotionally driven outreach to our families, looking at opportunities and options for summer feeding programs, partnerships with our local youth serving organizations, and then also continuing to listen to the needs for professional development in combination with teachers and principals. Finally, as has been referenced, the reentry stage, as we look to see what our 2021 academic school year will look like and maximizing that face-to-face instructional time that we know is so incredibly valuable, but also ensuring a healthy, safe, and supportive learning environment for our students, for our faculty and staff, and for our community. The next few slides are other resources. This is from the Education Commission. The next one is the legislative updates that would bring you up to date on everything leading up to March 13th and the General Assembly's meetings. A reiteration of the legislative priorities for the State Board and our original 2021 funding requests. We don't want to lose sight of these original requests and how they do differ from the COVID-19 emergency relief requests, and want to continue to lift this up, knowing that building upon the 2021 school year, that these are also very important considerations that we need to remember. And then lastly, legislative update links, again, previous to the COVID-19 outbreak. The second part of this presentation, I wanted to briefly lift up several of opportunities and initiatives through the state of the Shire, particularly the hashtag NC Lighthouse Leaders, which was referenced earlier. This is the theme for this month's North Carolina Teacher and Staff Appreciation, and we're super excited about revealing this week and really building on this throughout the month of May. And this will be our main kind of media piece on the next slide. Love this picture, and I love the Facebook frame that you can use. You can actually look at many different educators and DPI staff across the state who are using this in their frame, and then change your own frame on Facebook as well. These were some promotionals that the department and state board did to thank our teachers in support of their efforts, their day-to-day efforts, continuously lifting up and being that lighthouse for so many of our students and their families and our communities. Also could not let this moment pass by. We celebrated National Principal Day last Friday. These are three amazing examples of our principals, two of our very own state board advisors, Tabari Wallace and Matt Bristow Smith, as well as a familiar face who was presented to our board on several occasions, including our last retreat, Donnell Cannon from Edgecombe County. And our good friend Tabari Wallace and his efforts with West Craven High School, which has been showcased across this country. I put a link here for that video with Ed and C, the Today Show. I know that Katie Couric and Essence and Ellen DeGeneres have all reached out and highlighted and celebrate Tabari's actions. And you can tell this has been an incredible inspiration for so many people across our country, approaching, and I think surpassing now 400 million hits on this video watch. So this is a true testament to all of our principals across the states and their efforts in celebrating their students, particularly graduation, and making this as special as a moment that could possibly be in transcending this crisis. We also celebrated School Lunch Hero Day on May 1st, and this was a great promotional from our school nutrition teams led by Dr. Lynn Harvey. And I wanted to lift up a very special initiative called Durham Feast that is working in collaboration with Durham Public School Foundation and Durham Public Schools. I urge you to click on that link and see just one of countless examples of how communities are stepping up across our state to feed our kids, body, mind, and soul. And one final reminder that our Teacher of the Year advisor, Mariah Morris, continues her excellent work with the North Carolina Toys remote teaching and the Toy Time teaching on your own time, as well as UNC TV at home learning, which has begun to showcase small little social media promotions in between programming that highlight many of our teachers across this state. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome our IOP intern, Colin Smith. Colin Smith is a rising junior at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and joins the North Carolina State Board of Education as an intern through the UNC Institute of Politics program. You want to talk about hitting the ground running? Last week, he already has been working on a journal, really highlighting the impact of public policy work throughout COVID-19. And we felt like this would be a great opportunity for him, in his own words, to introduce himself. So we included a piece about what does public service mean to you. And I cannot wait to introduce him to you individually, personally, in the flesh, when we all come back together as we strive and continue to rise together. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And at this point, I will do my best to entertain any questions if time allows.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Questions, comments from my colleagues?
Chair Davis, this is Olivia.
Yes, Dr. Oxendine.
Yes, thank you very much. I have just a brief question of Mr. McKinney. Thank you for that very good presentation. It's both informational and motivational, so that serves both important needs. Mr. McKinney, if you would go back, I just want to verify my own understanding of the legislation that pertains to teacher evaluations. I think it's in section 2.16 in the 115C333. My understanding then is all processes, teacher evaluation, summatives, and any other pieces related to NESIS have been suspended effective March 16. Is that correct?
So I'm going to write this question down, Dr. Oxendine, and make sure I provide the correct information in following up on this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I will follow up with you and then send that information out to the board. Does that suffice?
That's perfectly fine. I'm available anytime after this call.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair Davis. That was my only question.
Certainly. Other comments or questions?
I do have one. This is Jill Cameron.
Yes, Ms. Kamick. Yes.
Mr. McKinney, and this may not be something you can answer, but I am receiving a lot of questions about the summer program, as I expect my fellow board members are. Any idea of that broad outlines of what that's going to look like, or when we will be hearing more about the summer program in terms of timing and length and just sort of what it's going to look like?
So, and we do, that is one of the, if you'll look at a document that preceded me, there are some reporting deadlines, and one of those is the summer learning plan, which will be June 22nd. And so we are working, currently we have provided a very preliminary document that JB and our TOY advisor, Mariah Morris, have looked at regarding the summer jumpstart kind of outline. And we will be submitting that to DPI and then beginning to work on guidance and really framework as to what those summer learning programs could be, particularly once the funding comes through. So that is absolutely something that is a priority right now because of the time-sensitive nature of that. Does that
Other
answer
questions or comments?
suffice?
Yeah, if I might add to Mr. McKinney's comments, and Mr. Buxton, please join me on this. So yes, there's an expectation or requirement in House Bill 1043 that our LEAs deliver summer learning programs to DPI by June 22nd. We expect the agency to be providing guidance to our LEAs in the development of that plan. The initial focus is on K-3 literacy, and as depending on funding, the plan also would hopefully be able to be expanded to other grades and perhaps other subjects, but the initial focus is on K-3 literacy. And then the timing of when that program would be implemented, of course, is dependent upon the governor's decision about when we can re-enter our facilities, as well as some degree the General Assembly's decision around calendar, and that we'd want to sync the start of this jump start to immediately precede the start of the regular school year. Mr. Buxton, is there anything more you'd add to that description?
Mr. Chairman, I just add, pursuant to one of Ms. Kamnitz's questions, that the funding was built on some research that shows that you want at least 80 hours, kind of contact hours for students in programs like this. And so it's built on a 3-week, 5 days per week, full day model. And so you have transportation and nutrition involved, as well as teachers. Obviously, that'll be contingent, as the chairman said, about our ability to get kids back into facilities. And I think some of the conversation we need to be having is whether there are some continued remote efforts we'd want to make with students who are performing below grade level and kind of at risk of entering the next school year even further behind.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. One last comment is we're grateful to the General Assembly and then the governor's signature that includes $70 million towards this program. There's potential that additional federal funds could be used by districts based on their allocation from the CARES Act. So there's more to come around the funding for this program.
If I might ask.
Other comments or questions?
If I
Yes,
might,
please.
follow-up question. In terms of the children who will be served by this program, I know it's difficult, we don't have anything after March 15th. Are we going to use that, whatever data we have to select the students who we will be serving?
And
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Buxton, will you? please?
Sure. Yeah, the intent from the General Assembly is that schools would use diagnostic data that they have up until March 13th to identify rising first through fourth graders who are identified as performing below proficiency in reading, as well as prior end of grade assessments to identify proficiency levels in reading and math. So the intent is to get below grade level children in those grades. And it was, the funding model was built based on that. There is some language about rising fifth graders as well being eligible to participate. And so that's the focus of the legislative language and the $70 million. But as the chairman referenced, districts could use flexible CARES Act and state money if they wanted to go beyond that and serve students at other grade levels or in entering courses such as Math 1. I know there's been a lot of conversation about high school math, and that's a potential, but not part of that 70 million.
Thank you.
Chair Davis, this is Olivia again. I have a comment to, a couple of comments. It's good to hear that there is some consideration being given to students beyond third grade. It is, it's come to me that the General Assembly has expressed an interest in summer teaching being provided to students through the 8th grade, especially those who need additional support in the area we know in reading and most definitely probably in math. So I do hope that we will double down on whatever means that we have at our disposal to extend summer learning opportunities to students on the upper end of the continuum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. I certainly share your sentiments there, and would frankly prefer that our support for students extend through all grades, in all geographies, in all subjects, and we'll continue to advocate that funding be provided to extend our reach as far as possible. We have a lot of ground to make up for so many of our students in the coming days, and the sooner that we can do so, the better for our students. Other comments or questions for Mr. McKinney in the legislative update? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. McKinney. We appreciate your excellent work here and the great summary that you provided us this morning.
Thank you, sir.
I'd also like to, yes, sir, add to Mr. McKinney's report a special thanks to 4 statewide associations who've been incredibly helpful partners with us before COVID-19, but particularly during this period, and that's the association representing our superintendents across the state, our teachers association, our school boards association, and the parent teacher association. Our thanks to those 4 organizations. We'll now proceed to the remaining committee reports, and I remind committee chairs in the audience that all voting on consent and any item requiring action will be done at the end of the meeting into the agenda via roll call. We'll begin with the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, and I'll turn to the chair of that committee, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm joined with the Student Learning Achievement Committee by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. We have a number of items on our agenda today, 5. 1 action on first read, 3 action, and a discussion item. And then we will have a new business item, COVID-19 policy update, where we will talk about the senior grading issue, as well as any other policy updates that board members might have questions about. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, if you would, just since we've been talking about leaders and our legislators in recent days, I just would like to acknowledge the passing of one of the great leaders in our state, former Senator Tony Rand. Many who knew him as one of the most insightful, successful, strategic, and just about the funniest legislator that anyone's ever worked with. I think we're fortunate that Senator Rand committed his significant talent and intellect to building our state and dedicated his entire lifetime to that. There's no question that the University of North Carolina system is better off for the significant leadership that Senator Rand gave to public higher education in the state as well as the community college system. There's no question that our K-12 system is better off because of his significant leadership. And I just wanted to take a moment and for the record recognize the service of a great North Carolinian, probably one of the best legislators in the history of our state, and the debt we all owe him for what he dedicated to building our system of education and education opportunities across the state. He is a great North Carolinian with a great family, and mourn his loss, but celebrate his contribution to the state. Thank you very much. We're going to start with SLA 1, which is the Governor's School Policy Revision and Appointment Recommendation. This is regarding some organizational developments that have happened with the dissolution of the Governor's School Alumni Association and essentially a merging of that function into the Board of Governors Foundation. We have a Board of Governors position for Governor's School that relates to the Alumni Association, and so the department is bringing a recommendation for how to revise that seat on the Board of Governors, and also an appointment recommendation to fill a slot that will be left vacant by the resignation of the now former president of the Governors Association. So I'd call on Ms. Sherry Thomas and Mr. Tom Winton to present that recommendation to us, which will be an action on first reading item.
Good morning, Board. Appreciate the time today to discuss this item of need around our Governor's School Board of Governors. As Mr. Buxton described, we have now had the dissolving of the Alumni Association. If you will recall, 5 or 6 years ago when we were facing the possibility of Governor's School going away because of no funding in the budget, the Governor's School Foundation was formed, and we're very proactive in raising some funds and helping support that entity, and they continue to do that today. The Alumni Association has been a longstanding organization, but they determined that they really have duplicative duties. They're all working together. The same people are involved in both organizations. So this is really more of a merger of those supports around Governor's School. And so with that, we are losing a position on the Governor's School Board of Governors, as JB stated, and would like to make a change in the policy to allow the foundation to make an appointment to the Board of Governors along with their president or appointee serving. So we would still maintain 2 representatives from the Alumni Association in essence, but it would come from the foundation. And then there is a recommendation of an alumnus to serve in that role. We have had the resignation of the president of the Alumni Association effective August 31st or sooner if we can find and appoint a replacement. So the ask today is that you approve the change in policy as well as this appointment. And I believe you have a resume to review for this second position from the foundation. And I'll be happy to take any questions you may have around this.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Board members, you have a number of attachments, some of which describe the dissolution of the Alumni Association, the makeup of the Board of Governors, a letter of resignation, I believe it's Ms. Stephanie Job, the resume for Ms. Deborah Goldberg, and the proposed policy revision and board appointment revision. Any questions for Ms. Thomas? Hearing none, we will vote on this today as an action on first reading that will be on both the policy revision to the Board of Governors appointment related to what was formerly the president and president designee of the Alumni Association, as well as the appointment of Ms. Deborah Goldberg. Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, sir.
Moving on to our action agenda, we've got 3 items. The first one is SLA 2, which is a required report to the General Assembly around competency-based assessment and teaching. We had this report in front of us last month as a discussion item, and we had some discussion about this report as an excellent distillation of what is occurring in our state at this moment and some of the different efforts and activities related to competency-based education. We also talked about the degree to which our current circumstances have made this an even more timely topic for our state's education system, and that we had some additional work, we think, to do in conversations with the department to answer some of the questions posed in the report that the department feels like we need more time and bandwidth to address. These are tough, knotty, nuanced questions about transitioning a system to a competency-based approach. And you will see in the transmittal letter, the draft transmittal letter that I think is up on the screen right now, a note that we're submitting the report as a kind of first step. And if you look down in the 3rd paragraph, requesting a meeting for the board and the department with chairs of joint legislative education oversight to discuss next steps on this report to address the questions that the legislature has about this item, but also to kind of update to the reality of the COVID-19 situation and the ways in which we are rethinking schooling moving forward. So I would suggest receiving this report and approving its release to the General Assembly, and as well as the draft transmittal letter, but want to leave time for any questions for the board for Doctors Stegall, Howard, and Shaw Coltrane, and I think Mr. Michaels was part of this report as well. Board members, questions about this report?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a question as much as I have a comment. Is that okay for me?
Please, Mr. Ford.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I think it'd be appropriate to kind of tie together the contents of this report and my remarks from the last meeting, and just saying that, and acknowledging this is the first step. I look forward to us continuing this conversation and walking down this path about the numerous ways that education can look different. And I hope that as we continue to dig deeper and excavate and envision that we continue to use those same screens and bring in the populations and stakeholder groups who we know may otherwise be adversely affected. And so I think this is an excellent start, and this gives me a little bit of hope, reason to hope that we might really be able to think outside the box for how to serve our children. But again, I just want to emphasize that as this journey begins, that we focus on bringing, folks who are typically on the margins into the center of the conversation. And so grateful for the report and happy to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Other questions or comments by board members on the competency-based assessment? Hearing none, we'll vote on accepting that report and sending it along with the transmittal letter to the General Assembly later on in our meeting. SLA 3 is the annual report by the State Advisory Council on Indian Education to the board. We had hoped, and I will say I had hoped in my own naivete about the COVID-19 crisis that we could do this in person this month. Obviously, that is not the case, but we don't want to delay the presentation on this report any further. And so we are fortunate to have Dr. Connie Locklear, who is chair of the council, with us today to present this report and have discussion with the board about its findings and recommendations. Dr. Locklear, thank you for being here with us today. I'm sorry we're not all together in person, but I appreciate your being available to do this over the internet.
Thank you. Tanake, T-N-A-A-Du, Niyat Kani Locklear, Huwat Iswa, Lumbee people. I bring you greetings in the Siouan language, and I said to you this morning, hello, how are you? I'm Kani Locklear, people of the dark water, the Lumbee tribes. It is my pleasure to present to you this morning the State Advisory Council on Indian Education report. As chairwoman of the State Advisory Council on Indian Education, it is my honor to present the report, 2020 Vision for Culturally Responsive Classrooms Through Tribal Consultation, Our Land, Our Stories, and Our Future. Would you move to the next slide, please? You see here our State Advisory Council on Indian Education mission and vision. I'm going to take time to read that to you. Next slide, please. Thank you. Some pieces I like to highlight is our culturally responsive teaching about Native Americans, the module that we presented a couple years ago. We had the opportunity to share this with you. This module is it gives a general CEU credit for teachers that are willing to participate in this module. And it is about 10 hours of, as you know, we talked about before, but we have had an increased number of teachers that have participated in this module. So this is some of the work of Stacey that we really wanted to highlight. Next slide, please. Another piece we like to highlight is this year we had our educational summit. And we organized this summit and we were able to, thanks to the help, I think, of Dr. Oxendine and board member Duncan, we were able to have this in Greensboro, which was a great location. We had our guest speakers were Katie Eddings of the Lumbee Tribe. She was Regional Teacher of the Year. Diana Coronaria, she is the Executive Director of National Indian Education. We also had Bianca Williams from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Indian Education, as well as our tribal leaders, our district leaders, our State Board of Education leaders, and our SACE members as well. So that was a great event. The focus this year for our summit was tribal consultation and meaningful collaboration. If I'm not mistaken, we had close to 150 people in attendance, and that was a great opportunity for everyone to come together to talk about the needs of our American Indian students in our state and how we can all work together as stakeholders to meet those needs. Next slide, please. This is the cover of our report. And as you can see, the large picture there is so impressive. We want our kids to graduate from high school. We want them to be productive citizens of society. And the two pictures at the bottom are just two pictures of our students participating in cultural activities. Next slide. I am not going to take a lot of time talking about all of these findings. As you can see, that our American Indian students are falling behind. And you have this and you can read this for yourself. Next slide, please. Here are some more of our findings. In every one of these findings, we see that our American Indian population is falling behind. There was an increase of 2.2 percentage points in math. However, as those points increase for our American Indian population, so are the areas for the other populations. So the gap is still wide. It's not closing the gap at all. And that's what we're really working to try to see what we can do to close the gaps. Next slide, please. Next slide. If it's okay with you, I'm just going to skip these findings because you have them and you can read them, and I don't want to take up so much of your time. I do want to highlight some pieces. This is a piece, can you move down to the summary for key findings for discipline suspension? This was a piece last year that board member Ford had mentioned, and we decided that it was a great opportunity to put this piece in here as it relates to the suspensions of our American Indian population. Next slide, please. Our recommendations for the state board remain the same except for one. And if we'll move down to 6, that will be the new recommendation that we have for the board. All the other ones are the same. This recommendation is strongly encourage district leaders to include American Indian education directors and coordinators at district-wide leadership meetings and strongly encourage meaningful collaboration and tribal consultation as outlined by ESSA. The purpose for this recommendation is that it is a mandate by ESSA. And so part of that mandate states that that we have to have tribal consultation, we have to have meaningful collaboration, and that Indian education directors that are in charge of these Title VI grants needs to be part of the educational leadership meetings that occur within their district, so they can highlight the information that they're doing on their end, as well as take the information from the district leaders and merge that together to meet the needs of the American Indian students. Next slide, please. I want to take this time before I finish up, and I want to have time for some questions. I want to take this time to thank the State Board of Education. I want to thank our SACE members, North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs, and our DPI staff. And I also want to say that this is a bittersweet moment for me. This is my last year serving with SACE. It has been my extreme honor and pleasure to serve as a member of the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. Children, another piece I like to highlight is some pieces that were mentioned earlier today. And I think it was Mr. Segal that mentioned that education has been our equalizer. And then several other members mentioned the fact about the social emotional well-being of our students. And if you recall, last year we mentioned that as well, and we still highlight that. And the only piece that I would say, the good piece that COVID-19 has brought to us as a nation, is that it has highlighted the inequity, the lack of equity that exists among all of our students. But I do want to thank each of you that serve on the state board for all of your hard work, for what you are doing to try to level the playing ground for all of our students. I live in a community, and actually, I just received the internet service that I need 1 month before COVID-19 hit. But prior to that, I was paying $120 to have 40 gigabytes of internet in my area from a satellite service. And 1 month before this pandemic hit, I was able to get broadband internet in my area. If that had not happened, I would have to drive to my office every day during this pandemic to work from home. And that is the same situation that's occurring with many of our students in our area. I also want to highlight another piece that I think is so important that we need to address, and I would like to share this with you as state board members. Many of our American Indian students live in these rural communities. And we have students now, I have a parent that called me recently and shared with me, she has 5 children. She is an essential worker. She cannot afford to pay for daycare. So her older children are the daycare providers. So they're taking care of these children at home, and they're trying to take care of their homework, their remote learning work. And what she has said is, I can't do this math, and I'm having trouble. So she knew I was a math teacher, so I was able to help her. But those are just one of the situations that some of our students in our rural communities are experiencing. And I know that you are addressing that. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you are doing for our students all across the state. I know this is not an easy task. I also want to give a huge shout out to DPI, because I know that they have been working extremely hard during this time. I also want to thank all of our SACE members for what they are doing. And once again, it is a bittersweet moment for me. This will be my last time presenting to you. Not be my last time taking part in SACE meetings. I will still be there, but my term ends this year. So to all of you, I am so thankful for what you do. I am so thankful for your support of all of our students and for the opportunity to serve as SACE board member and chairperson. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you, Chairman Duncan. Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, as a member of our SACE board. Thank you, Superintendent Johnson, and all board members. It has been my pleasure and my honor.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear, for those comments and for your service. I want to make sure board members know and Dr. Locklear knows that at a time when we're able to gather, we will be bringing Dr. Locklear back to a board meeting or requesting her presence so we can appropriately thank her for her leadership of the State Advisory Council and her service to the state. So Dr. Locklear, we look forward to seeing you, we hope, in the near future. I also want to thank you for your report today, which I think has been emblematic of your leadership of the council and the sense of conviction and commitment and advocacy that you've brought to your leadership role and to the council and to the dedication to putting powerful truths in front of this board and in front of the public school community. I want to make one comment and then ask my SLA colleague, Dr. Oxendine, for any comments she'd like to make. I appreciate the persistence in the recommendations, continuing to put important issues in front of this board for action. And I would note that I see great alignment between our relatively recently passed strategic plan, its focus on equitable outcomes, and the recommendations that SACE and you as its leader have put before us. I appreciate that. Dr. Oxendine, any comments you'd like to make?
I certainly do. Thank you, Mr. Buxton, for giving me just a couple of minutes, and I could go on and on, but I'll keep it to a couple of minutes to applaud Dr. Locklear for her hard work and just complete dedication to her role as chair lady of SACE and her insistence that this summit took place that occurred back in January, brought together over 2,550 policymakers, tribal leaders, educators, and Title, I get confused, it could be Title 6 or 7 now, Indian education. I want to say that again and again and again, North Carolina stands out and alone in having a state advisory council on Indian education plus legislation and general statute that created SACE going back to 1988 is the first piece of legislation. We did update and make some changes to the legislation in 2014. The bill was actually, the new law was signed at UNC Pembroke. I just want to thank the General Assembly, thank this board, thank the department for working so closely with SACE to make this report possible. Dr. Locklear mentioned the continuing gaps in achievement, math, and I'm sure reading, some gains, but still the gap is there as the other populations of students also make improvements. So the gap is just, it's persisting. So what I would say to SACE is we're going to come out very soon with a definition of high quality reading instruction. And I would say to SACE, let's put that definition on the road, make it real, unfold it in our school systems where we have concentrated numbers of American Indian students. Again, I wish you well. Dr. Locklear, you've been marvelous, and all the members of SACE who've been part of your team. Again, a great group. And thank you, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Board members, any questions or comments about the report for Dr. Locklear?
Mr. Chair, it's Mr. Ford again, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, so I want to begin, but just in the interest of being culturally responsive, just acknowledging that, all of us, even though we don't sit in the same rooms, that all of us ultimately, that we inhabit native land. Where I sit here in Charlotte, this is former Catawba land. And I think that that's important to do because it brings into the context the lived experiences of every other racial and ethnic group. And I want to appreciate both SACE and Dr. Locklear for continuing to bring attention to the specific and yet the diverse needs of the Native American indigenous population here in the state. and offering us recommendations for how to make sure that, we as a board that is trusted to oversee the education of all students, that we don't forget, that Native people are here, still exist, and that they have a specific set of needs. And so I just want to, and I know I'll speak for the rest of my board members when I say that, we're committed to this process, committed to taking into account these recommendations and making sure that they fold into and are implemented as part of our strategic plan. But I wish you well and whatever you continue to do next, but I do want to thank you for your leadership and for your guidance in this process.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure. There's a Native American proverb that says, "We will be known forever by the tracks we leave." My hope and prayer is that I continue to leave tracks that are beneficial for all students in North Carolina. And I thank you for your leadership, all of you. I thank you for allowing me to serve. It has been my pleasure and my honor. And I will carry this time with me forever. I will still be on the background fighting for the needs of our Indigenous and American Indian populations, but not only for them, for all of our students across North Carolina. That is my passion. That is my desire. Thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for your dedication to SACE.
Thank you, thank you, Dr. Locklear. I somehow can't see you in the background. We look forward to your leadership continuing in a number of pursuits, and we look forward to welcoming you in person and appropriately thanking you for your service when we have that opportunity.
Mr. Buxton?
Please.
This is Susan Silver, the liaison to the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. And I apologize for jumping in, but I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to honor Dr. Locklear. I've worked with her for 2 years as SACE chair. We've worked very closely, and she has been such a tremendous asset because she is the leader of one of the nation's largest Title VII grant recipients as the director of Indian education in the public schools of Robeson County. So she's been able to field so many questions because of her experience, and has just been a tremendous asset. I do want to say to her and put it on the public record that she has to sit out 2 years and then she can come back and serve another 2-year term. So I'm hoping she doesn't retire on me in the meantime so that she can come back. But she's been a tremendous asset, and I thank her for her leadership. And she served as a mentor to American Indian educators, who we sometimes forget. We certainly want to focus on our children, but it's also our goal to raise up strong American Indian educators who can be in front of our children so they can see teachers and leaders who look like them. So I thank her for that as well. And just as a reminder, on behalf of SACE, they are asking that the board approve this report so that it can be pushed out to district leaders, and we can support them in getting this information to districts so that they can work on those recommendations. Thank you for letting me speak.
Dr. Silver, thank you for those comments. I appreciate your comments by Dr. Locklear in the process. Board members, we will be voting to approve this report when we get into the votes at the end of the meeting. Our last action item, SLA 4, which is a required report to the General Assembly about the nationally norm reference college admissions test. This is a report about the outcomes of the procurement process. I remind you that back in March, we voted to award the college and career race assessment to ACT. This report details that process. Dr. Howard is here for any questions. I'd ask her just to make any comments she'd like and then answer any questions. We will vote to accept and send on this report today. Dr. Howard, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. And just very briefly to share that this process was a little bit different than we have done in the past through guidance from the state board, which we generously appreciate. This process included a survey of LEA district staff and charter school staff. We had 168 responses that gave us input on how these assessments are used for improving instruction, for college planning, and for preferences on whether or not the assessments are administered online or paper pencil. So after the survey, we then drafted an RFP as directed, and we then did another step, which was we had vendor presentations of all the responders to the RFP, and we involved in those presentations a non-voting representative from a district office, a chief academic officer. So with all of that information, I think the RFP itself was improved, and then the process for the review was improved as well. And so with that, the review panel, which was internal and consisted of assessment experts, standards and curriculum experts, and a career and technical education expert, we were able to make a recommendation to the state board, which, as you noted, was resulted in a approval from the state board in the awarding of the contract. So that would conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Appreciate that and appreciate the level of engagement with the field to inform the recommendation. Board members, any questions about this report? Hearing none, SLA 4 is the last of our action items for the SLA committee this month. We do have one discussion item, SLA 5, which regards the Exceptional Children Policy Amendment around specific learning disabilities. I'm going to ask Ms. Thomas to make some comments about this, and we'll note that this is for action this month. This is out for public comment, so when we come back, this is for discussion this month, but when we come back for action, we will also have the benefit of any additional public comments that have been received. Ms. Thomas, would you explain this addendum and the process that you all have used to get feedback?
Yes, Mr. Buxton, thank you, and good morning again, board. We, as you may recall, passed a policy change for the identification of specific learning disabilities back in 2016 to align with the research and the national movement toward looking at a student's lack of response to an intervention rather than a discrepancy model. This was included in IDEA revision back in 2004. And so we did thorough study then. Since that time, since the policy was passed, we've had some feedback. We've listened carefully to some public concerns, some parent concerns, some group concerns. And so we're coming back with this policy amendment today to address those concerns and hopefully clarify some language that many people have felt might be problematic or confusing. And so at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Matt Hoskins, our Assistant Director, who has led the work on this policy amendment.
Good morning, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this discussion item before you today. I'm just going to go slightly more in depth in regards to the rationale for some of the changes that were made to the policy, as well as the process that we use to determine what the changes should be. Just to revisit IDEA in 2004, at that point in time, it did make it the state's responsibility to determine what the criteria are to identify a student as having a specific learning disability. At that point in time, with the growing research base to show that a severe discrepancy model between a student's intellectual ability and their academic achievement was not a valid means of identifying students. In their guidance, in the guidance of IDEA said that a state must not require the use of that severe discrepancy, and that they must permit the use of a process based on the child's response to scientific research-based intervention. So the 2016 policy that was passed by the board in February, that is where it focused on was the analysis of a child's response to scientific research-based intervention as the means for identification of a specific learning disability. And I'll move on to the next slide, Deanna. I'll go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having some difficulties here. I'll get it right back up. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Also, in 2016, what that policy did was we prohibited the use of a cognitive discrepancy model, as well as prohibited the use of a pattern of strengths and weaknesses. Just some details in terms of that 2016 policy, again, using an RTI-based approach as just one single component of a comprehensive evaluation that needs to be completed for that eligibility determination process. And it continues to require all of the other requirements of IDEA, like our child find obligations, procedural safeguards, things like parents' opportunity to examine records, consent, prior written notice, those types of things, a full individual evaluation, data that demonstrate that the child was provided with appropriate instruction within the general education setting to ensure that the unexpected underachievement and lack of response is not due to inappropriate instruction that was provided. And it also continues to require, as always, intervention and progress monitoring data. So that was always a component of eligibility criteria for SLD, even prior to 2016. I'm not going to go deep into this, but I do want to just provide brief rationale for why the discrepancy model was prohibited in its use. One of those is because of the psychometric features of the assessments that are used in that analysis. It's frequently referred to as a weight to fail model because students typically aren't identified until about third grade and don't get access to services that they need prior to that, as well as the discrepancy model is not a strong predictor of who will or will not respond to intervention. So rather than using standardized assessments to do a discrepancy analysis, it makes more sense and it's a more valid approach to actually provide a student with intense intervention and measure response. So as this amendment was made in February of 2016 to go live July 1st, 2020, we have been providing a lot of resources, a lot of training, and engaged in a lot of dialogue with various advocacy groups, parent groups, as well as practitioners who are preparing for the implementation of the policy. And what we tried to do was put together common themes that we were hearing about specific language concerns, particularly areas in the policy that seem to be ripe for misinterpretation. So we listened to those themes from those different stakeholder groups and decided that we wanted to take a deeper look at that, and we held a facilitated discussion in December. We used a structured process referred to as a situational analysis, and we had a large number of stakeholders join us at that point in time, including the original task force that was responsible for the research and the writing of the 2016 policy. We had folks from universities across the state, parent advocates, professional groups, school practitioners like school psychologists, and EC directors attend that meeting. And as a result of that meeting, there were 15 issues within the policy that were examined and brought up over that time that were then put into 3 prioritized recommendations for language change within the policy. The first of those was to ensure that we had some sort of definition of what the threshold for a scientifically research-based intervention was. Particularly those who are responsible for the identification wanted to ensure that the appropriate rigor of the science behind the practices or programs that they were using, that it met those criteria, and they needed to know explicitly what those criteria were. There was part of the language in the previous policy, or in the current policy that was passed in 2016, that required 2 interventions to be provided prior to making an eligibility determination. We combed the research, we couldn't find anything special about that number of 2. And in fact, now the research is moving more towards systematic intensification of an intervention rather than going through multiple interventions. We also heard from folks, we had some language about group comparisons within the policy, specifically related to culturally and linguistically similar peers. The intent of that language within the policy was to ensure that appropriate analysis and eligibility determination was done, particularly with English language learners, to be able to rule out language acquisition and not inappropriately misidentify a student as having a learning disability when it was a language acquisition process that student was going through. So I'll just give an example of the red line and mark throughs of the policy itself. In order to operationalize scientific research-based intervention, that term was actually one that's used in IDEA, referencing back to No Child Left Behind. So what we decided to do was to use the ESSA definition of evidence, which describes a continuum of evidence going from quite rigorous, where there's an experimental methodology that's used and seen as statistically significant effect, down to demonstrating a rationale based on high-quality research finding positive evaluations that process is likely to improve student outcomes. You'll see at the bottom of that edition, we say that school-based teams should use the highest level of evidence when determining intervention across areas of concern. So we do want to ensure that evidence-based practices are used, but we recognize that the availability of evidence-based interventions is much more robust for, say, reading than it is for oral expression or listening comprehension. So this policy sets that threshold for evidence-based based on what the highest level of evidence is available within the area of concern. This is the part of the 2016 policy that referenced comparisons such as culturally linguistically similar peers, and we decided to strike through all of that. We felt that it was too open to misinterpretation as the intent of that, and it shouldn't be included in policy, and that we could be better suited to provide guidance on this within guidance documents and not the policy itself. We also, from the stakeholder group, removed the language around 2 scientific research interventions and just said the results of evidence-based intervention. So removed the requirement of having to have 2. And then finally, we wanted to ensure that our definition did not exceed the federal definition of a specific learning disability. The guidance provides us some opportunity to develop the criteria, but we wanted to stay true to the federal definition around specific learning disability. So we removed some of the language and added some language that this is not the exact definition that's used, but it's very close to the federal definition for specific learning disability. And then I briefly just wanted to talk about some of the implementation resources. We have been gearing up for this since 2016, but also prior to that as well. We have a white paper that's been disseminated describing the rationale for this policy. We have a number of different fact sheets that help with practitioners and ensuring appropriate identification. Have tools available that help schools and districts measure their readiness to implement the policy, and then to look at different sources of evidence and map that to the eligibility criteria, as well as a document that discusses some of the systemic things that, when in place, make the implementation of this model easier. And we provided a lot of professional learning through our MTSS modules. We have always had a strand at the EC conference since that 2016, focusing specifically on specific learning disability. We have March and Summer Institutes where this is always a topic. We have had frequent trainings with our school psychologists across the state, and this has been a common agenda item on our quarterly regional meetings that we hold with EC directors across the state. So I hope that provided a summary of the rationale for some of those changes, the process for how those changes were considered and made, and then what that looks like, and we're happy to entertain any questions at this point.
Mr. Hoskins, thank you very much. Appreciate that report on the process and the substance of the revisions. Board members, this is a discussion item for this month. Questions for either Ms. Thomas or Mr. Hoskins?
Mr. Buxton, I have a quick question.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes, going back to the slide on the slight changes in the definition, I heard Mr. Hoskins make the statement that it's similar to the federal, but not quite. Is there any reason why there's some deviation from the federal definition?
There is. So the federal a lot of research has occurred since when that definition was written, and I'm not sure what that will look like if when there's a reauthorization of IDEA. The most substantive deviation from the federal definition is around psychological processes, where we just say processes, and the reason being is that we thought when you think about psychological processes, that's frequently associated with some sort of cognitive assessment. And given that this model prohibits the use of a discrepancy model, we didn't think it would be consistent with that definition.
All right, yes, I remember when the discrepancy model was discussed several years ago and approved by the board. So that's being consistent with a decision that, in keeping with some discussion and decision going back, I would say 2 or 3 years ago.
That is accurate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you for the question. Other questions for Dr. Hoskins, Ms. Thomas?
Hi, this is Mariah Morris, and I have a question about the policy conversation.
Ms. Morris, please.
Yeah, thank you for the really comprehensive report, Dr. Thomas and Dr. Hoskins. I have a question about some of the changes that you're talking about at the school level. So I'm familiar with the old way that we are amending right now of having a student go through the MTSS process and going through the interventions in the classroom, and then having the school psychologist step in and do the testing to see if there's that discrepancy. Will the school psychologist play any role in this new model in terms of any form of testing or cognitive testing, or will that role be kind of taken out completely?
Ms. Morris, thank you for that question. The role of the school psychologist will not be taken out of this process at all. And the measurement of a student's responsiveness to intervention is just one component of a comprehensive evaluation. And the components of that, there are obviously some requirements that's by policy of what needs to occur, but also the result of the IEP team coming together and determining what additional data are necessary to not only come up with an eligibility decision, but also determine what programming should look like for that student. So the role of the school psychologist might be slightly different just in terms of some of the assessments that are used, but the psychologist's role in the interpretation of the data and the development of the IEP and the programming that will occur for the student is still going to be a major role.
And Ms. Morris, this is Ms. Thomas. If I could just add another piece of clarification. Previously, the discrepancy model relied on that comparison of an achievement score in an academic area to an IQ. This policy still does not prohibit the use of a psychological evaluation for information. It's just not the sole source for making that decision anymore.
Okay, thank you. May I ask one follow-up question?
Please.
Rather, it's more of just something to think about. When we're looking at using the interventions in part of this comprehensive view of whether a student's going to qualify for a specific learning disability, when we're thinking about this through an equity lens, I want to just remind everyone that our schools that are our higher poverty schools are going to have higher needs in the classroom where these interventions are going to be taking place, that we're going to be using for very serious decisions about a student's classification. Within those classrooms, teachers are going to have higher needs in terms of more severe learning needs, more students going through the MTSS process and receiving intense tiered interventions, more trauma-based behaviors that might make it harder to do interventions that are much more concentrated. And I just want us to be aware of that role when we're thinking about using classroom data and making decisions.
I just want to say thank you for expressing that. I think that we agree with those sentiments, and that's certainly considerations that we have within training and guidance that we provide. So I appreciate that statement.
And I would concur. I think we are right there in the same conversation with you.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Appreciate that feedback. Any other questions for Dr. Hoskins or Ms. Thomas? Hearing none. Again, this is a discussion item for this month, and we'll come back and take action on this addendum next month or a future board meeting. Last item on the SLA agenda is a COVID-19 policy update. We're going to have a chance to have some further conversation on the senior grading issue. I've asked Dr. Stegall and Ms. Shaw-Coltrane to make some comments. I'd remind board members, it was March 27th when we passed a policy to ensure that seniors had certainty about their future and that students who were passing as of March 13th would receive a passing grade and be eligible for graduation, and that districts should be making their priority those students who were at risk of not graduating and ensuring that they were receiving the credits that they needed. We also dropped or suspended local requirements that surpassed our 22 credits required for graduation in the case that stood in the way of any students graduating. An effort to make sure our students were not harmed by the pandemic. When we came back to do an update on the K through 11 grading, there were a number of questions raised at that time about the policy we had passed on seniors and any potential impacts. And after that meeting, we made a request for the department to re-engage with the UNC system, the community college system, our military partners, any others for whom there may be impacts to resolve any questions that board members have had about potential impacts for seniors of the PC-19 or WC-19 pass or withdraw policy. And so at this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Stegall first and then Ms. Shaw-Coltrane to bring the board up to speed on conversations you've had, again, with those partners, local superintendents, in response to some of the board's questions and any updated information you provide. And let me say this before Dr. Stegall goes, board members, after we hear those comments, we'll welcome questions and comments from board members about this information as well as from our board advisors. Dr. Stegall.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Buxton, thank you, board members. We, as you probably remember, after March 27th and prior to March 27th, there was a lot of engagement with district leaders, stakeholders, lots of educators from various backgrounds about how we should visit and take care of the needs of our seniors, knowing that they were the first priority given how close it was to the end of a school year and the equity issues that existed. I will say, I'll start from the most present and work my way backwards. The amount of feedback we got directly after the March 27th board adoption was overwhelming. I went back and counted 14 emails or texts I received from various people, board members, from school districts, teachers, one student, superintendents, saying that this was needed and very well received. I do know that there's been a re-engagement of discussion, so I wanted to remind the board what our initial goals were when this discussion came around. Our first goal was to focus on, when we were looking at all this before the adoption, our first goal was to focus on student graduation from a statewide perspective. We wanted to get students the course credits they needed to graduate, since at the beginning of this crisis, we did not know the impact of how this would continue and how long it would continue. Another one of our goals was to support the mental health of our graduating seniors. Their whole worlds were turning upside down. Senior year is already a pivotal point in their lives, and so much change was happening so quickly. We wanted to relieve the anxiety of grades and completing courses with grades when teachers had access, knew that the access was an issue, and all aspects of school were not necessarily known. And we were working at short periods of time of what we thought might be the next phase of instruction for these students. Additionally, a goal was to respond to the statewide outcry. And I mean, there was a large number of calls, emails, group chats with board members and field-based personnel with State Superintendents Association, superintendents in the field. There was an overwhelming outcry to approve a statewide policy that does not give grades, but instead gives seniors pass withdrawal. And we needed to provide certainty in a very uncertain time we were facing. A significant number of district and charter leaders were consulted prior to the board's decision, and close to 90% of the 19 superintendents who were directly consulted with stated that pass withdrawal was the most appropriate plan given all the equity and uncertainty issues across the state. As we just heard from one of our previous presenters, Dr. Locklear, she shared about the lack of internet access in her community for students and even for educators. And that exists in many parts of the state, and it still does. Students in those regions deserve the same opportunities, but had limited access and limited opportunities. This is also why some of the colleges we consulted with agreed wholeheartedly that grades for this semester would likely not be used for wait list students and students up for scholarships. They would look at the totality of the student's high school experience, and as needed, the student could provide data if need be on a specific course from this semester or work products, but they realized that there was varying degrees of access across the state for students who were all competing for those same college positions if they were on wait list and for scholarships. Numerous school leaders, district leaders, and key stakeholders were also consulted outside of the superintendents. Many of those shared that class rank, and the superintendents reinforced this, that class rank, Latin honors, and valedictorian, salutatorian determinations would be based upon grades through the first semester of the senior year due to access and equity concerns with seniors. This gives them 7 semesters of the student's high school career to base those recognitions off of. Over the past several weeks, the school districts and charters have been working under the assumption that graduating seniors are only to be held accountable for work as of March 13th. They'll receive credit for the courses they have continued even throughout this semester. Seniors have been encouraged to maintain engagement and focus on the work, but the focus would be on support and content mastery and not on grades. So many schools are not, even though students are working and the teachers are supporting them in every way possible, the focus has not been on giving grades or receiving grades. It's been on content mastery, individualized needs and instruction, and support. Both seniors and their supporting teachers have focused on that, again, that mastery learning model, and not on grades since the board adopted the guidance that was given. They have been functioning under these rules that were established, again, on March 27th. The focus for potentially failing seniors as of March 13th has also been on support. Many teachers have given individual student need guidance support to aid improvement so that every student has an opportunity to pass the course requirements. It's not, again, not been on maintaining grades for a report card, but looking at the specific needs of those students and filling in the gaps. As shared, our own Sneha Shah Coltrane has been leading this effort from the beginning, and I say leading, she's been on the forefront with groups that have a vested interest in this, both educators in the K-12 setting, as well as higher ed, workforce, military, other avenues for students when they graduate. I'd like to ask Sneha Shah Coltrane to share some of the key stakeholders that were part of the discussion prior to the adopted recommendation, and then also share some of the feedback that the department has received and that she's had contact with over the past few weeks. Ms. Shah Coltrane.
Thank you, Dr. Stegall. Immediately when the pandemic hit, even before the official work group had started, we began reaching out. First, we did check in with our student advisors and to get their initial thoughts, which of course continued through the student focus group, and how having that relief and burden of the grades made an incredible difference for the seniors. We also immediately contacted the UNC and North Carolina independent colleges and universities. Immediately, meaning the very first week after the school building closures, I was already having discussions with both of these organizations because of prior established relationships. And we began conversations around some plausible and possible solutions to the crisis that we were now facing, with the priority on seniors, knowing that our seniors needed to be taken care of first and foremost to ensure our families and students had a guarantee that their future, at least when it came to schooling, was in fact taken care of. By the time we had brought our recommendation to the State Board on March 27th, our North Carolina colleges and universities were in support of our plan and felt like it was very reasonable for seniors, especially since most had already had their plans for post-secondary determined. Some expressed concerns about the issues of access immediately and how to use the spring 2020 grades as a determining factor. And we were assured that the IHEs will be flexible to get what they need to determine any remaining admission based on each student's unique circumstances. I personally have brainstormed with colleges and universities to help them think through things, and they realized that in this situation, having gone through March and now in April and May, there are many other factors to be thinking about at this time. We have also asked and verified with UNC Independence and North Carolina Community College System that they will continue to work with our students to ensure successful transitions for our seniors. In fact, I will say they have given more support to our seniors than in typical years. I've heard from many seniors unprompted saying how incredible their colleges have been to let them know that they are taken care of. They already feel like they're part of the college communities, as well as other post-secondary pathways. We have actually worked with the military recruitment offices to ensure that it is very clear that our students, that we support early graduation. I actually penned a letter just recently because there was some confusion in that matter, and we were very clear and have given clear direction that any student who has met graduation requirements and would like to enlist, they'll be given that opportunity. Recently, I saw on social media, even with Dr. Jordan and Chatham County, there was a young gentleman who was given a special early graduation ceremony right before being enlisted, because these students have seen that their post-secondary pathways can begin and that they're able to not carry the burden of those grades and not being able to graduate. We have also verified that our seniors and our other students will be held harmless with this policy with the NCAA. I know that has been an incredible concern of many of our constituents. They are essentially looking at the first 7 semesters and only looking at a reduced number of core courses, and that the PC-19 will actually not be counted in any way to harm their eligibility requirements, and they have an entire setup. If there are students that are on the bubble, they will work with the colleges to support eligibility. I do not need to repeat what Dr. Stegall discussed about how our students have been focused on completing the coursework through mastery, and our teachers have done an incredible job, just like our principals of the year, supporting the whole child and the well-being, and truly supporting the last a quarter of our students in their school year. As we know, from March to April, there was maybe a few weeks left of instruction for a senior. And then when we look between spring break and all of the other senior activities, our teachers have been focused on supporting the mental health and ensuring they have what they need to post-secondary success. I will also add that the students that have continued particularly focused on grades then will be rewarded with their college transfer. We have many students who have completed and have continued working on grades through CCP, which is why we had a memo out very early in conjunction with the community college system and figured out how the college transcript would continue to show those grades, because they are in fact the official authoritative source of those grades. And I know there have been many questions about AP as well courses. Those students have been working not necessarily just for the grade, but more importantly, for the college credit that will come with their testing scores. I would like to reiterate in closing that the NCDPI grading work group does not recommend a change in the state board grading policy for seniors due to the fact that we do anticipate there may be many students who believe that because we have changed the policy, if we were to change the policy at this point, we essentially change the rules of the game midway, and they would feel like they had not had that opportunity. We also have received overwhelmingly the great majority of feedback from both LEAs and charters to support the maintenance of the board adopted policy. And department leaders have been asked to please advocate for maintaining the already State Board of Education adopted and established policy for graduating seniors. I do believe that there will be a significant burden on districts and charters if we change the policy at this point, and feel very confident that all of the work that has gone before you is the best decision to move forward. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Michelle Coltrane and Dr. Stegall. I appreciate the update and the effort to track down some answers to some of the questions that board members had been raising last time. I'm sure there are other questions from board members. We all have been receiving emails from some students and parents on this issue, and would at this time ask board members to raise questions they'd like to have addressed.
Mr. Buxton, this is Olivia.
Dr. Oxendine?
Thank you very much, and just a few comments. And first of all, I want to congratulate Dr. Stegall and Ms. Coltrane for your noble work and for your recognition for that noble work. I will begin by saying this issue certainly has been important to me all along, but I think the level of importance has increased in the last couple of weeks because of an ongoing amount of letters from parents and from teachers of senior students and parents of senior students. And I will admit that after a day or so with those letters continuing to roll into my email box, something told Olivia to take a minute and pause and read those letters more than one time. And when I did that, the issue of the senior grading policy became very, very, it troubled me a bit. And I recognize what a reverse of the decision, the vote, would mean. I certainly do. And I don't want to add work and labor and anguish to what is already going on across 115 school systems as high schools bring to an end of the work around grades and graduation and commencement and celebrations. But at the same time, I just have to bring forward a couple or three points that matter to me, and these points have been certainly conveyed in the correspondence from others, teachers and parents. And it's that seniors are working very hard at this time to raise a GPA. Some seniors will not, many seniors have already been accepted into their college of choice. We know that through early admissions. So they've known since back in the fall where they were headed to college. So this GPA, the letter grade versus the pass, is a moot point with them. But we have many seniors, we certainly don't know how many, who will not apply to college until next fall or in the spring or maybe in 2 years. So these students, you know, based on the letters that I have read, not all letters, but some letters, we have a body of students out there who are trying to get under the wire with a stronger GPA. So, you know, I'm very compelled by those letters. Another point is that I have reviewed transcripts in my role as college professor and admitting students into the MSA program. And when I look at a transcript, I take a look at the GPA, but I also look at the grades. And I know that of course, I don't see many P's on transcripts to graduate school, but I know to an admissions officer and college administrators who review transcripts and they make decisions about admission or non-admission, a P is not as informative nor as persuasive as a letter grade. A B matters, an A matters more, a P does not. And that admissions officer, the person who is poring over transcripts, looking at grades, looking at GPAs, I would think is going to be more compelled by the letter than the P. Now, maybe I'm missing something in this whole discussion, but it doesn't matter. These are the points that I want to raise. Another point is this: we need to make sure through state board policy that we are making decisions that's leveling the playing field for every senior, every student. And I have no idea who the seniors will be competing, with whom they will be competing, out-of-state students, for seats into college, for scholarship dollars. So making decisions so that the playing field is level is the best and the most we should do for every student, especially we're talking about our seniors at this time. And lastly, I just think that seniors deserve the right to a letter grade which carries a numerical measure of value. So I will conclude on that point. Thank you, Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. David and Sneha, any responses would be helpful, and then recognize Mr. Ford.
I'll speak real quick. As we spoke to higher ed entities, both private and public, they shared that the students are competing against students from other states, and many states are doing this same thing with pass withdrawal that we are. And because there's discrepancies, much like the NCAA clearinghouse is dealing with this, the focus is looking at the bigger body of work, which is the 7 semesters before their spring of their senior year, looking at in totality. And for those students that are on wait list or or again, as you mentioned, looking at possibility for scholarships, that they would have a renewed interest with those students. There may be some artifact discussions, or students still can show what grades they've earned if they have earned. The issue is many students have not been earning grades. Many seniors have not been earning grades because of the guidance that was given. So change right now would mean only students whose teacher decided to continue to give actual letter grades and number grades would benefit if we changed this, but it could then conversely harm those who weren't getting the grades because of the guidance that was given. So I think either side of the coin, we run the risk of alienating one group over the other. Colleges have already said that they were going to pay more attention again to the full picture of high school, not just the spring semester. And they knew that many states, or if not all states, are in this exact same boat. In fact, many schools, districts, and states canceled school prior to North Carolina, so they have even less data to base it off of. So it's just a unique year. You probably haven't seen P's before. We've never had a pandemic like this, obviously, that would cause us to reevaluate the way grades are reported. So I'll just say we certainly understand that there will always be circumstances. We have students like Meredith that were a senior, and it impacted her Park scholarship. But I think NC State recognized that this semester wouldn't carry the weight that it normally would, and they instead looked at the totality of her high school experience. So I'll stop there. I'm not advocating for or against. I'm just presenting that the educators and the education leaders that we trust to lead our school districts overwhelmingly, 90%, close to 90%, have said, please do not change this. And I just feel that we need to represent their voice as well. They're looking at all students, not specific individual cases. They're looking at what's right for the masses and for doing no harm to students.
Thank you, Mr. Stegall, Dr. Stegall. Mr. Ford, if you would be willing to let me get Dr. Miller in here, our superintendent advisor, just since we're talking about, Dr. Stegall just mentioned those school leaders. Dr. Miller, sure. A few comments here, and then Mr. Ford, I want to recognize you and other board. Dr. Miller?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Perfect. I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to reiterate the stance of the Superintendents Association on this issue. The executive board of the Superintendents Association was polled, and of all those that responded, only 2 were in favor of changing the guidance from March the 27th. Changing this guidance this late will cause issues for districts. Several cooperative and innovative high schools have already graduated. I saw my friend and colleague Rodney Shotwell had on social media yesterday pictures of a school in Rockingham County that had a drive-by graduation either yesterday or the day before. The final grades for those students have been calculated based on the guidance received from March the 27th. As Ms. Shaw Coltrane mentioned, the Army asked districts to allow students enlisting the opportunity to graduate early so that they could go ahead and get started. None of these students would be able to go back and change what they did from March 27th till now based on the guidance that was issued then. Regardless of where you fall at this point, this issue comes down to timing, and it's just too late in the game to make changes. Admissions officers from UNC and the independent colleges and universities and community colleges already know and are on board with the fact that there are going to be P's, passes, PC 19, whatever the nomenclature is, on transcripts for at least 3 more years. And again, I just want to reiterate that the overwhelming majority of the executive board of the North Carolina School Superintendents Association do not support making changes in the March 27th guidance, specifically regarding seniors. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Appreciate your feedback. Mr. Ford and then Ms. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so I also won't be advocating that we change course, but I did want to just take a moment to acknowledge the observation of many people who have sent emails to us calling out the inherent contradiction in the way we've handled seniors versus those grades 9 through 11. I think the appropriate action from the beginning would have been to adopt a blanket policy that does the same thing for grades 9 through 11 that we've done through seniors. I appreciate the ways in which Dr. Stegall has explained thoroughly and very logically all of the thought that went into how things were handled for seniors. And what I heard was that improvisations were being made to accommodate, in the wake of a pandemic, class rank, admission into post-secondary institutions. What I heard also was that those post-secondary institutions were building empathetic systems, were willing to accommodate and willing to change the way that they did business in the wake of this tragedy. And these are some of the very same principles of logic that I think should have gone into the grades or the option rather to have grades, or whether to take a pass withdrawal for grades 9 through 11. As Dr. Miller just mentioned, admissions officers know for the next 3 years they're going to be seeing PC 19s or WC 19s. And so I just want to, again, I'm not advocating that we reverse course, but to me, this is one of those moments where it kind of demonstrates that if we lead the way, we can essentially change the way that the system operates, and not get hung up necessarily on, the prestige associated with grades or GPAs, but really find ways to accommodate the needs of individuals. If the needs are for individuals to make sure that they get their scholarships, that they get into schools, that they get into post-secondary institutions or other opportunities, we can find a way to do that that doesn't necessarily abide and follow to, to a system that really fetishizes grades and GPAs. And so I just want us to kind of use this as an instructive moment and just kind of speak to those who have been reaching out and giving their voice to this issue. It is something that we've noticed, but I hope that we carry forward and learn from this.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. White?
I'm trying. You there?
There you go. We can hear you.
Excellent. Mr. Buxton, thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak once again on this issue. It's no secret that I am passionate about offering our seniors the same choice that we have offered to our North Carolina 9th through 11th graders. I feel like I made a mistake. Leadership it's a journey that's fraught with unexpected challenges and unknown landmines. And sometimes even the smallest misstep by any leader can result in unintended ripple effect consequences. It's good leadership to admit and take responsibility for actions that upon further review, thought, and consideration, maybe I could have handled differently. And so on March 27th, with the information that we had at the time and in all of our best efforts to hold every senior, give them the opportunity to graduate and look out for those that were on the bubble and to be advocates for making sure that they had every opportunity to make it to the finish line, we made a decision as a group that we felt like acted in their best interest. At a recent board meeting, we approved a new grading policy for the remainder of our grades that was thoughtful, that engaged many stakeholders and work groups, and it gave me pause to the decision that we made back on March 27th. I have heard a lot of the discussion today. I've discussed with colleagues and staff regarding why the senior policy should remain unchanged. But today, I'm going to ask you as my colleagues to lead and to consider a change. In the discussions I have not heard one valid argument regarding how one student's choice to choose a grade to not only appear on the transcript and be included in the GPA calculation would harm another student's choice to take a pass withdrawal. Granted, we probably are not talking about the students that had grades of C's, D's, or F's. We are talking about students who had letter grades of B's or A's at the time COVID-19 impacted our school system. Both choices are just that. They would be choices. In our state, folks, we have spent millions and millions of dollars on students who are academically challenged because we believe education is the fundamental building block to success
to be a globally competitive citizen. We spare no expense on making sure that every student has a chance to graduate. And in this particular case, we have the chance to do something that is right, that won't cost our state any additional dollars. For me, this is not about college admissions and NCAA. This is about the personal work journey of students who have spent 13 years as a part of our state education system. We have seniors at the end of a very successful academic careers. It's a small percentage of students who desire this change. Students who, for the large part, have placed excellence at the pinnacle of their 13-year academic journey. Friends, if honors and awards, personal honors and awards, salutatorian, valedictorian, for those students who chose to work up until this very day, if honors and awards are not important, why did we spend 45 minutes at the beginning of today's meeting recognizing school leaders who have gone above and beyond what is expected to get the work done? These students have gone above and beyond what's expected, and they just want to see that on a simple piece of paper. The cohort of students who deserve this choice are the very ones who know that hard work matters. They know that recognition matters. And today I am asking you to consider giving them the opportunity to choose the grade that they had earned as of March 13th. And if they want to, they could choose the grade that they've earned since the hard work of that date. Thank you for your time today. I do want to ask if the Lieutenant Governor is on the call. He was engaged in meetings today, and if he's on the call, I'll let him speak for himself. If he's not, I have a written statement from him that I'd like to enter into the minutes.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, are you with us?
No, he's not with us today.
Okay. Is it okay, Mr.
White?
Buxton, if I read his statement?
Without objection from the chairman, I think that's appropriate.
Yes, that's appropriate. Go ahead, Ms. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest, sorry I could not be on the call during SLA committee time as he has meetings lined up all this morning. However, I will try to be on the call during the vote. I wanted to quickly provide my thoughts on giving senior grades. I have advocated for seniors receiving a grade since the beginning. While I understand this decision was made with the best intent at the beginning of the COVID-19 shutdown, that isn't the best option for all of our students, and the board should reconsider this decision. For many students, this grade could decide their acceptance to a university outside of North Carolina, could determine if they are valedictorian, which my office has been contacted about, could determine if they could get a scholarship, would reward them for all the hard work they put into their studies while distance learning. It doesn't really matter what the reason is. Allowing students to decide if they want a grade is what is best for the student. I understand this might be a burden to the department and the individual LEAs, but this to me is a no-brainer, as it does nothing to hurt a student, but can definitely make all the difference in an already hectic end of high school careers for those students who want the grade they earned.
Thank you, Ms. White, and by extension, Lieutenant Governor. I'm going to, two things here. One, I'm going to, in a moment, call on Mr. Chasteen, who's got some comments he'd like to make. Out of respect for two board advisors who are high school principals and our board advisor who's a superintendent representative, I'd like them just to make any comments about kind of implementation and logistics, just so we're understanding what it would mean to Ms. White's request for that change to the policy, just so we're all aware of impact on what we'd be asking local leaders to do, as well as Dr. Stegall and Ms. Shaw Coltrane. And then with respect to Ms. White's request, what I'd like to do is suggest that we take a vote on the policy that we have in place. And so essentially, a vote to affirm the policy that we have in place. And then depending on that vote, we'll see where we move next. So first, let me ask Mr. Chasteen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Buxton. I know you and I have had a lot of conversation about this issue. And first of all, I just wanted to tell everybody, everybody's worked incredibly hard. Ms. Coltrane, it just, to come up with the prior policy that we approved was a yeoman's work, and it was a great job. No doubt about that. I've been wrestling with this issue quite a bit. Some of it's personal, having 4 kids, and 2 of them would have been impacted by this policy. I went back 5 years and looked at what their status was as a senior, and looked at service academy applicants that may be delayed a year and are trying to get their GPA up so they could get into West Point, the Air Force Academy, and the Naval Academy. Scholarships that needed the GPA to be bumped up. Wait list issues, gap years, deferred college, all those kind of things are very valid. I appreciate Mr. Ford's statement earlier, and I agree with his sentiments. Also, I completely understand what Mr. Miller made. I think what is the best point on why this is a hard decision is because the decision was made earlier on. People have been acting on that, and now we're midstream, and we have 4, 5, 6 weeks, whatever, left in the semester, and having to adjust that for seniors is a difficult issue. But given that it has still significance, I think there's still a lot of weight for, in the end, if there's a way for these seniors that did stay the course, that did stay committed, that do need the grade, do want the grade, to provide weight and to honor all the emails we got from parents and students on this matter. I think there's still a lot of merit for allowing a decision and a change. Ms. White has described. So I know it's not an easy issue. I know everybody's worked very hard. When you're working and you're sprinting through COVID-19 season, which I'm intimately involved with that in different countries around the world, it's a difficult thing, and everybody's having to deal with it at a very fast pace. So I think everybody's done an incredible job. This might be one more opportunity if we can help 1,000 seniors, maybe there's 2,000, in fact, maybe 50,000, I don't know. But some of them care, and some of them are emailing us. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chasteen. I did not see a hand raised electronically here by Ms. Kamnitz. Ms. Kamnitz, my apologies. Let me get you in on this.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. I'll be brief. And I too would like to acknowledge the heartfelt letters and emails that we've been getting, and I've considered them very carefully. However, I have to come down on the side of supporting our policy. Many of these decisions that we're making right now are extremely difficult because we're in unprecedented times, and there's not a clear answer to many of the issues that are arising. 6 weeks ago, we made the best decision we could on March 27th based on the situation at that time. And seniors across the state then made their own individual choices to continue instruction or not, depending on their circumstances. To change the rules right now would be unfair to many who made their personal decisions based on the policy that we approved. And now they would have no way to revisit their decision or to get those 6 weeks back. So that to me is really an equity issue, and I am guided by that and feel that we should not waver from the policy we approved in March.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. Let me ask Dr. Stegall, Ms. Shaw Coltrane, Mr. Smith, Mr. Wallace, Dr. Miller, anyone who'd like to weigh in, just to make sure we're clear about the kind of activities that would need to happen to provide seniors a grade and then a choice of whether they're going to take a numeric grade or a PC 19 or a WC 19. If any of our advisors would like to weigh in on that first, just to make sure board members are clear from your leadership standpoint, having to implement that change, what it would mean.
Mr. Buxton, this is Mr. Bristow Smith.
Please.
Just a very timely conversation. I'm actually right now assembling the graduation stage for the outdoor virtual graduation that we will be holding very soon. The pre-recording session in which our seniors who are graduating from our school this year will be honored individually. And then collectively their graduation moments will be assembled into a virtual graduation ceremony so that the totality of their experience can somewhat resemble the traditional commencement experience. And I say this because I'm truly sensitive to the fact that there have been so many consolations for our seniors who are graduating from us this year across the state. And the class of 2020 has been through so much. Hurricanes and floods several years ago, pandemics now, academic ups and downs. When it comes to grades, I'm so appreciative of Mr. Ford's remarks at our last meeting in which he commented on how grades have created a system that extrinsically motivates students to achieve in school. And in some ways we have undermined the intellectual curiosity that kids are naturally built with and that they grow up with because of the system of grades. That being what it is, in March of this year, under extreme circumstances and operating in good faith, the agency and the board approved a policy intended, I believe, to protect students and to provide them certainty as much as possible in the midst of this pandemic. And so with that in mind, I'm so appreciative of the fact that that's what was motivating the goal of that policy. If the board on its further reflection were to decide to change that policy now, as an advisor, I don't want to comment on the decision itself, but I would like to comment on the implementation side, which I think is, to your point, Mr. Buxton, what that would require. Every LEA in our state at the high school level are currently looking at systems on how to implement the 9/11 grading policy. And I do believe that those systems could easily be extended to include seniors in the class of 2020 if that's what the board decided. So the processes we have in place for 9/11 students could, I believe, at the school level and at the district level, be extended. However, that would require central office high schools to reverse course on a significant amount of planning that has already taken place as of that March 27th policy, in which we were providing clarity and certainty about what we were doing with seniors. So there are, I think, some situations in which, for example, students might be on academic probation with National Honor Society, and a grade might have made a difference as to their National Honor Society standings in spring of their senior year. I think those are outliers. I don't think that we build a policy around that. But in terms of implementation, I do believe it could be done. I think that from a district level, Superintendent Miller is better positioned to comment on that. But at the high school level, I know that the policies that we are, or the procedures we're setting in place for 9/11 could be, if the board and the agency together decided that's what was best, could be applied to seniors. It's not too late for that.
Thank you, Mr. Bristow Smith. Mr. Wallace, are you with us? Any comments?
Yes, I am, and I share similar interests and sentiments as my colleague Matt Bristow Smith, and it's so unfortunate that we're late in the game. I was steadfast in definitely wanting to allow the seniors to be able to have the opportunity to choose until I heard Dr. Miller, and now I'm hearing Matt's graduation that he's preparing for. So it seems that the early colleges will be disenfranchised in the opportunity, in this opportunity that we're presenting, which does result in a concern and a cause for equity. My kids, because I'm a traditional high school, my kids actually, like Miss Amy White said earlier, chose to continue working with the hope of the policy being amended And as Amy said, it's largely my top tier kids that continued working with the hope of being able to have their GPA affected. And again, in regards to AP and the honors weighted scale, I can see where that comes from. So I'm kind of conflicted. I'm in the middle of this thing. I understand the hard work is going to be for central office to get this implemented if we were to reverse course. But on a school level, it would be seamless. We would just put the same policy for 9/11 to our seniors. If the early colleges weren't already graduating, that's the sticking point right there. Now we have an equity issue. My kids' GPAs go up, but the early college kids that graduated early, they do not get that opportunity. So I'm kind of in the middle, but I hope that helps helps y'all in making y'all decision that you have. It's a tough decision. I do not envy y'all at all in regards to this, but I have received the same emails that you have in regards to certain situations that seniors have been put in due to this unfortunate pandemic. So I do say that in regards to the top tier kids and all, I do understand it. All kids were provided a choice, but some decided to keep working. So this is definitely a tough decision that you're going to have to make. Thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Miller, any comments about logistics? And then Dr. Stegall and Michelle Coltrane, and then we'll move to vote on a motion.
I just reiterate what Principal Wallace just said, which I mentioned in my comments too, and the fact that we have early colleges that have already graduated, and those students, if the policy or the guidance changes, those students will not have had the opportunity to go back and do anything differently. I think Ms. Kamnitz also mentioned a lot of seniors 6 weeks ago made their decisions as to what they were going to do academically moving forward based on the guidance that came out March 27th. Those that have already graduated and gone on, be it the Army or early college, will not, if the policy changes, will not have an opportunity to course correct, if you will. Also agree with what both Matt and Tabari said for traditional high schools. If the decision is reversed following the protocols for 9/11, that could be done. But the issue in my head is the kids who have already graduated or gone on into the armed services based on the guidance that was received on March 27th. And just like Mr. Wallace said, that is a sticking point in my mind and in the Superintendent's Association.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Sorry, go ahead, sir. Mr. Buxton, is it okay if I say one more? This is
Yeah, please.
I do, like everyone else, I empathize for students having a high school daughter myself and understanding what it takes to get the work that they put in. I do struggle with what we do with students who took the recommendation and the option, just as has been said, to seek other opportunities, whether it's the graduation, going into the military, focusing on social and emotional help. How do we reconcile that we gave them that permission and now we may say that other students who didn't take the same option, even though it was a choice, will now get grades, could possibly pass them in GPA. And then for those teachers who took that guidance that we gave, and we said grades would not be a factor, it's about pass fail, and those teachers who focused on teaching quality work, following up with students, giving input, growing students, but not putting a letter grade on it, more about the dialogue, the mastery of the content, less about the time spent on the class and a specific assessment for a grade, but instead mastery and application of learning. And there are many teachers who focused on that aspect for their seniors. How will this impact you in your next phase of your life? How will this content help you in college? Whatever it may be, but did not give academic grades, traditional letter and number grades. Those students continue to work as well. Those students continue to be engaged. Those teachers continue to be engaged, and they will be penalized because they do not have a representation, a number representation to again, because we told them they didn't need to have that. We told them pass withdrawal was the new standard for the rest of this year. So I don't know how we reconcile that given we told them that was their choice. And so those are key. Just, there's no right or wrong, and it's not choosing sides. I do believe we've committed, and going back on it after such a long period of time, I think we would have the equal number of emails coming in for those who were disenfranchised by the change back. I think this will be an ever-evolving cycle if we make a change at this point in time.
Thank you, Dr. Stegall, and I appreciate the input of all our advisors and the questions from our board members, and as many members have noted, we've appreciated the input we've received from all quarters of the state on this matter. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry?
Mr. Buxton, Wendell Hall.
Yes, Mr. Hall, please.
A few minutes.
Yes, and then after Mr. Hall, I'm going to proceed to a motion that if the chairman sees as appropriate, that we can vote on to make sure we've got some clarity about where the board stands. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton, and I will be brief. As I sat and listened to all my colleagues and the comments that's being made, there is no right or wrong answer here. We know that. We are in some waters that is truly uncharted and trying to do something to help all of our kids. The first thing that came to my mind when we started this conversation earlier was something that the Superintendent Green said earlier about the timing. The timing now to change is parenting, because I know how that can be disrupted. I also say, and I know we all agree with this, that taking information from DPI, from Dr. Stegall and Ms. Coltrane, and the work they've done, and no one is saying that they're wrong or right, but I do believe it's the right thing for us to stay the course and move on with this. It's hard, but it's a decision that has to be made, and I'm ready to make my decision on this issue. I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I want to make sure there are no clarifying questions before we vote.
Mr. Buxton, this is Mrs. White. I do have one question.
Yes, Ms. White.
Okay. Regarding the early college graduation and leaving them out of the loop of, again, what I don't see as a change, I see it as an add-on, an additional choice for our seniors that, again, I feel like would not be negatively impacted if they chose the grade at the March 13th cutoff time, the grade that they had already earned, that all students were at that time on a level playing field. But my question is this, with no timeline for seniors to decide whether they wanted the pass withdrawal, there should also not be a timeline on them to select a grade. And so, again, this is, for me, this is not about NCAA or college admission or whatever. It's a choice for those students to have that grade appear on their transcript. And I feel like there's still time to do that because we didn't put a time for them to make that choice.
Ms. White, what's the question?
So the question is, for the argument surrounding the early colleges and those students being left out of a decision that would be made now because they've already graduated, could they at this point have that? Could they select at this point to have that appear on the transcript, even after the graduation?
Ms. Shaw Coltrane or Dr. Stegall?
This is Sneha. There are many procedures that will have, depending on the decision of the board, that will have to be revisited for Power School. There are significant procedures. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Buxton. There are significant procedures that have been put into place. Depending on whether or not those students were graduated, if they're already graduated, You would have to, I would need to check with Power School if that's even possible to go back into the system. It would take work, but I can look into that and see what that possibility is. The bigger concern would be how to reach those students, as well as other students who may have already graduated early as well.
Thank you, Ms. Coltrane.
We have the perfect solution. We have Tabari Wallace, and we'll just send him out individually to every student across the state.
He can road trip. We've seen that. Mr. Chairman, if there's no objection, in order to, one, I think be respectful of some of our board members' requests to revisit the policy, and two, to provide some clarity to school districts, local board members, parents, students, about the board's stance on the policy, I think it would be prudent for us to go ahead and vote on the existing policy. And I just want to make sure there's no objection from you for the committee to do that at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate response to the discussion we just had and the requests we've received. So do you have a motion for the board to consider?
So I think to best understand where we are on this, I would move that we reaffirm the March 27th policy. And I think that we just need to see where we are on that. So let me make that motion to reaffirm the policy. Is there a second on that motion?
Okay, I'll run the vote, Mr. Buxton.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. No problem. So motion by Mr. Buxton to affirm the senior grading policy terminal March 27th. Is there a second?
Second,
Mr. Keenan.
Mr. Ford.
I believe I heard a second by Mr. Keenan.
Correct.
Okay. So any questions or further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton,
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine,
No.
Ms. Chemnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. White,
No.
Mr. Chastain,
With all respect to all the colleagues on the call, I'm still going to go no.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes.
Motion
Motion
carries.
carries. All right, thank you. Well, Mr. Buxton, I assume that concludes your committee work for the day?
It does. If you would just permit me to thank my colleagues for a very, I think, respectful and substantive debate. And I think we all appreciate each other's perspectives and opinions and understand that everyone is coming from a standpoint of doing what's best for students. And so I think every single person has honored that mission of our board, and I appreciated the conversation.
Yes, and I do as well. So thank you, Mr. Buxton, and thank you to my colleagues for that difficult and discussion and decision. Let's take a break until 12:15, and when we return, we'll start with the last committee meeting of the day, the FISUP committee. So let's take a break until 12:15.